on the podcast because it seems like you travel a lot, but I wanted to talk about your work that you do. And so I guess we just start with like what's your role right now, and then we'll talk about like kind of how you got into that.
Yeah, so I am the Chief Operating Officer for United Community Housing Coalition, which is based in Detroit and focuses on housing issues and including representation and home ownership and basically all the efforts that surround getting our residents to that point. So that's what we do. Um, pretty extensive work locally. And then I'm more of a support for the team, right, in that capacity.
Okay. Now,
Yeah.
now is this your education background?
Oh no.
Okay.
um so I was really fortunate. I followed my grandfather's footsteps and I went to University of Detroit Mercy. And obviously they have an extreme focus. Extreme's probably not a fair word, but a heavy focus on service, right? So when I was there, I was part of a service group, Alpha Phi Omega, and that's where I met Father Tim Hipskind and Drew Peters, actually, Helen and Mike Peters' son.
Oh
And
yeah.
I distinctly remember um, Drew caught me one day and we walked across campus together and he told me about this thing that he was trying to get kicked off the ground and they wanted student leaders and all these things. And I had just decided I wasn't going to be playing soccer anymore. So I thought, oh, I have all this time. Let me see if I can help you. And so I entered into the world of campus kitchen at UDM and worked with Father Tim Hipskind there. And then basically that's what kicked everything off. I was not planning on going in nonprofit. I had a very, heavy mindset on I just got to get a job after college and what does it take to get there and all these different things. And I changed my major. So I just didn't know what was going to be what was going to be. So I was taking all different opportunities that I could, and this one just, for whatever reason, stuck. And I'm not sure if they're stuck or if I was stuck, but one of us was, I'm sure. So yeah, that's what kicked it all off. It's a crazy thing to think about going back all those years, but yeah. So
Yeah. So you were just so were you like business or something? Is that what you originally were in school
I
for?
actually started as a nursing student, and
Oh
that was
wow.
a terrible idea. But the reason that I went into it was because I thought, oh, I want to help people. And so I thought my mom was like, you need to get a job that's going to pay when you graduate and all these things. And, so I thought, nursing, that should be good. And then I realized like I don't really want to work with geriatric patients. Children and peds kind of make me incredibly sad. I can't do the surgery side of it. Like, what am I doing? What am I getting into? And then there was a presentation in the abnormal psych class that they make you take in nursing around industrial organizational psychology, which is like human behavior in businesses or organizations, right? So I thought, oh, that's fascinating. And I remember I was still in nursing for another year or year and a half after that, but I thought that's really something that's pretty cool. Seems common sense, but some reason it doesn't seem like like really plays out that way. And so I started to get into like what does that mean? And then you have leadership tied with it. And then Campus Kitchen happened and it really like that was the direction I started to head in. So always thought I'd go into HR, like how do we make those things happen? And just life kind of spun out after that point into some good stuff. I loved it. I loved working at Campus Kitchen. I loved learning about more leadership principles, and obviously with I'm forgetting what it's called now, but it was the Service Learning Institute at the time. And I got to meet, Father Tim on a deeper level, which was very cool. And then I got to meet Professor Zimmerman Oster, and I thought she was fantastic. And just really, I don't think that they realized how much of an impact on my life they had, but they introduced me to the nonprofit world. And
Yeah.
I was excited about that. That was
Wow.
something that still means a lot to me today, obviously. So, yeah.
Great. Oh wow. And so you ended up at your in your current role. Um, so how did you get there? And then like I guess what attracted you specifically? into the Housing Coalition. Yeah.
Great. So, if I can kind of share a story, I guess.
Yeah, go ahead.
I was at the food bank for over 10 years and I loved what I did there. There was not anything that was horrible about it. I really did enjoy my time, but I just felt like I'm being called to do more, and I wasn't sure what that meant. After graduating with my undergrad, I thought I'm going to take a couple years, but maybe I'll be a lawyer. Like I did go into pre-law. I know I got a weird background, but anyway, and I decided not to take the LSAT, not go down that path, but I was still really interested in further education. So, 10 years later, I applied for an executive MBA program at Case Western, and they somehow accepted me. So I got to spend some time really focusing in on skills and leadership. They have a huge leadership component, just like Detroit Mercy does. And they really think that if you're going to be in a higher level in an organization, you need to know what makes people tick, what makes them better at their work, what creates a positive energy that really pushes things forward. And so while I was in the program, I thought, okay, I should start applying places just to see like what happens. And I'm watching all my classmates, because it was a small cohort. There were, I think, 22 or 23 of us. And I'm watching all my classmates get these amazing promotions and all of that. And it can be quite discouraging when you know that like you want to do something else, you're not sure. I was sending my resume out to a bunch of places, but nothing. I would get pretty far in the interview, and then it would either fall flat or something wouldn't happen. So it was the second to last class session, and we had monthly sessions, several days in a row. And my two young boys were at my in-laws. And so I came back and I thought, oh, I can actually go to mass by myself. And I know that that's not how I should have looked at it, but I did. And I was like, okay, well, before I go pick up the boys, I'm going to go to mass and I'm just going to lay it out there. And so I went to Saints Peter and Paul that weekend. And I was sitting on the side, just where my family usually sits. And I just looked up at the cross and I said, what do you want? What do you want? Because I felt like I had done everything that I personally could. I applied to all these places. I was, reading up on how to be the best interviewee and, how to network and all these things. And that's not my forte. I love partnerships. I'm not a networker. It's very different in my mind. So I literally remember just looking up at the cross and I said, like, it's you and me, bro. What do you want? And I just felt peace in that moment. And I was, you're still anxious, but I just thought, okay, I gave it up. So right now, something's got to happen and the next day I got a call from the recruiter at United Community Housing Coalition. Would I be interested in this COO role that they have open? Now, mind you, I had been looking across the city of Detroit in particular because I really wanted to focus my work in the city. And I didn't know about UCHC. I didn't know anything about, I knew about different housing work and housing groups and that sort of thing, but I didn't see a role that was open for me, nor was I ever looking at like a C-level position, to be totally honest. Mm-hmm. And so it was just a really bizarre situation. I got that call. I was starting to look nationally and in some cases even further than that. But my family wanted to really stay here. So it's just a really weird situation. So got the call from the recruiter, had my first full-on interview a day or two later, and then another interview with their executives, I think that following weekend, and then another one right after that, a couple days after, for a follow-up. And they offered me a job within the whole process took about a week and a half, which is just nuts. But it went from me just looking up at the cross and being like, let's go, man. I don't know what skills I have, but make it happen to, a job offer that fast and something that I really cared about and wanted to, specifically contribute to Detroit. So that was really cool and I'll never forget it.
Yeah. And that timeline is amazing because I don't think most people know C-suite interviews are usually weeks, sometimes months. Before whether you've been offered the position. Yeah.
And I had literally been in that exact same process, not, for senior director, VP levels, months of interviews and, 2 interviews a month. And all of a sudden you're 5 months in and you're still aiming for that job. And then this just happened. It was such a whirlwind, but I thought this literally can't be anything but God leading me to this one thing, because it checked
Right.
every box that I had. And housing wasn't like a target, but was something that, growing up, it was always food, shelter, clothing. Like,
Right.
if you're going to be in giving back to your community, those are basic needs. And if you as a Catholic are being called to help someone, that's like where it starts,
Right.
in a lot of
Right.
ways. So anyway, it means a lot to me now. Since then, it's been a lot of chaos, but yeah.
Right.
Yes,
Um,
yes, yes, yes.
wow. Yeah. So, okay. So what does your role look like there? Like, I
Yeah.
mean, you're a COO, but what does it look like?
Well, a lot of my staff members say I can't look at your calendar, because it literally is different every half hour to hour, depending on what's going on. But I love it that way. So, um, I get to wear a lot of hats. I have conversations around like our actual physical building and what our staff needs are in that kind of capacity, to process management and data-driven insights, and really working with our data team on like what do these things mean, and can we maximize any of it, or do we need to inform our funders of any of it? So every single day I have meetings either internally or externally, to really figure out, like, housing is complicated, but sometimes we overcomplicate too, right? Is there a simpler version, or one that's kind of like scaled down, that we can really build foundation success and then grow out of that a little bit? So, I mean, the agency has been around for 50 years, 50 plus years now. So I'm just coming in at a point in history, right? But because of how I came in and the story I just told, I really feel an obligation to make sure that where I'm spending my time is effective. So especially right now, I have a hyper focus on partnership growth, because you can't solve the world's problems without people at your side, right? And I think that we can be more effective with those that we have in our corner, and we have great people already, but are we maximizing the potential there, and are we leveraging their networks too? And is there a way to really collaboratively figure this out? So what does it look like day to day? Today, in particular, we have no heat in the building. So I'm at home, as is all of our staff, and just doing virtual calls. And that's where, my time is spent a lot doing that. I also whiteboard a lot. Hey, can we figure this out? Or, what's the future look like? So strategizing and then figuring out the operational pieces that go along with it. At the end of the day, if I don't know, that's probably a lot to have a very simple answer, but you know how it goes, right? Your
Right.
head
Yeah.
kind of spins a lot in an operations role. So that's what it looks like. It's special. I'm very grateful for what I get to do every day and the people I get to work with. It's been incredibly rewarding, very difficult. But again, when you can simplify it and then see fruit driven, it's one of the it's so cool. It's so cool. And I can't attribute any of that to myself in particular, just, you know, helping people be the best in themselves, which I think is something that I'm really privileged to be able to do.
Yeah. Think about, I saw on your website that your tagline is keeping Detroit housed. So is there something about that idea that you really wish people knew? Because I think there's a lot of rhetoric out there about um, underhoused people,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
and I think just hearing it from people who are in the trenches doing that work is helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. So, there are so many different areas of housing that people focus on, and my agency is really around the prevention factor. And what I mean by that is you have homeless shelters and you have groups that are fantastic at working with those that really are in chronic situations and need extreme support and, mental health guidance and all the things that come along with that. Our agency is like the step before that. That's at least how I look at it and how I've
Mhm.
come to think about it. And keeping Detroit housed for me was really the effort of, we meet people in eviction court. We've got over 20 attorneys that will be down at court 3 days a week to help people with their eviction cases, of which there's an incredible amount. Big cities, per capita, you're thinking usually like, oh, 4,000, 5,000. That's a lot of cases. Pre-COVID, it was 30,000 cases. Now, because of our work along with other legal aid agencies, we're at about 20,000 cases, which is still astronomical. And the city of Detroit has committed to, representing people that are of low income and really need support. So we're there basically to defend them and try to keep them in their home. And the reality is sometimes we're definitely able to make that happen. It needs wraparound support. So we try to find the ability to, can we help them with that 1 month rent, or can we help them recertify for their subsidy that something went awry on? What can we do before they end up on the street? And so that whole team really focuses in on that work. And I'm so proud of what they've done. It's amazing. They've been adaptable at every single stretch of the way, and they just really care. And it's such a beautiful, beautiful thing to get to see. But anyway, so they're there working on that. And so in my mind, keeping Detroit housed, right? Whether if we can't win their case because say that there were a lot of different components that are potentially prohibitive, we have a whole team set just to pivot them into a more effective, more sustainable location too. So again, we're really working on like, let's let the homeless shelters really work on the people that are in that chronic position and need the help. And we'll do what we can too there, right? But if I can prevent them from having to get to the street, especially in cold weather like this, where there's so many more health issues that occur, and it is horrific what these people have to come up against every night. If we can do that's my goal. And then in addition, that's on the rental side. But when you talk about the home ownership side, we do tax foreclosure prevention, and we help with HOPE applications. And really, we try to make sure that people can stay in the home that they're in already, right? So if you're the homeowner, but you have no income or you're on SSI, and you get to tax time and you're looking at your budget and thinking, how am I going to pay taxes? Like, that's where we come in to try to help. And there's a lot of predatory pieces across the city too. Land contracts can be predatory. We'll step in. We'll actually buy out people's land contract, and then they'll owe us at a 0% interest. And so it's all about like, wherever you are in this system, essentially, can we create a sustainable environment around you? And then what can you do for your community too, right? If you are a stable component now in your neighborhood, your neighbors are looking at that as a positive, right? Because now it's not a cyclically moving situation. They know who their neighbor is. And now you can start to build out that neighborly love in a way, right? Whereas when it's transient, it's a lot more difficult. Keeping Detroit housed is really, to me, like focused in on making sure that people have that representation, the support, and whatever they need to remain residents, especially in the city, but hopefully in the home that they've already built for themselves.
Yeah. And so you're really further upstream in the process of, whereas people who watch this podcast will be familiar with Pope Francis Center, right? They're dealing with the acute situations or the chronic situations. So you're further upstream, which is important. We really need people at different phases of that cycle to help break it. Yeah, that's right. And I know during COVID, I mean, people weren't working, people lost their jobs, and it was just difficult to pay your mortgage or pay your rent or
Absolutely. Yeah. So I take no credit, and we're still kind of working through the final details of it, but UCHC was one of the designated agencies to issue COVID assistance during that time.
Oh, awesome.
So it's a fascinating situation where, especially in court, but even out of court, we were a resource agency. So our history is, pre-COVID, we helped thousands and thousands of families, but during COVID, we issued that millions of dollars that we had never even fathomed before then.
Yeah.
So we went from like a $4 million approximately agency to a $78 million agency within a year. And that was all direct assistance essentially. And so you hit it on the head when huge issues happen, or technology changes shift and skill sets have to pivot, but you don't have the time to be able to do that, or just people aren't allowed to go to restaurants, and so restaurants close, and then all
Mm-hmm.
those jobs are lost. It has a huge impact. And so, we were definitely part of all of that. Um, and still are a part of, okay, so now we've learned some things. So what can we do differently? And you hit it on the head too. Upstream is, where we can succeed. We always were targeting, the eviction prevention, which really, we had crisis intervention team that would work like, okay, so we had a condition where you had to pay your, 3 months arrears by X date, and it doesn't look like you're going to do that. Okay, let's jump in and let's move you now. Well, a more effective time to do that is earlier in the process, and ensure that people know that we're on their side, so that they're honest, so that we know whether or not whatever situation at the end of their court case is actually doable for them. And if it's not, let's address it early. Let's get to it before it becomes a major issue in a last minute scenario. But by the time they have an eviction in court, they're about to be members of the Pope Francis Center. Right. And that's exactly that's our sweet spot, is preventing that from happening. And last year, I think it was over 10,000 individuals that we were serving through that, several thousand cases. And every year we see people, and Detroit in particular, it's been really heavily hit by all the different kinds of technology booms and other things where, generates jobs, but it doesn't generate, lower level positions where, people are making a livable wage for extended periods of time. And so that's what we do. We jump in there.
Wow. Yeah, I don't think people realize it doesn't take much, especially if you're middle class, to find yourself there. I like during COVID, my husband he still has his own business, but at the time, he did corporate cleaning. Well, if everyone's working from home, you don't need your office cleaned, right? Now, we were fortunate. We had 2 clients that were considered essential. And like we hung on by the skin of our teeth. But
oh my gosh,
without that, we would have been one of those, we would have been, finding ourselves at the mercy of, your organization. And so it's really your organization is critical, especially, like I said, for those people who are middle class or at the bottom of the middle class, right? Where they're one crisis away from
that's right,
losing their house. So
that's right. It is incredible. There are people that are well off, right? But in reality, you're well off right now. It could be a paycheck. It might just be 2 paychecks, right? But something can get you out of whack incredibly fast. And especially with the population that we serve, it's 1 paycheck and then you're in some serious need. And you might be able to lean on family for a minute, but your family might also be struggling, especially with the generational issues that we have across Detroit. So it's, again, I'm really proud of the team because they're the ones that make this all happen. And they're just so dedicated, and they have been dedicated well before. I mean, our executive director's been at our agency for 40 years, just turning out this work, right? And he's an attorney, so he has been in court representing them and then building out the agreements and doing some really beautiful things. And it's amazing to work beside these people. I feel very blessed. So.
Yeah, that's amazing. Now you've shared a little bit, about your faith. And I think you said that your dad went to
my grandpa.
Jesuit? Your grandpa, okay.
Yeah, my grandpa went to Detroit, University of Detroit. And actually Jesu as a young boy, they lived right in the neighborhood. Actually, it's sad, their original house got demolished. It was on the other side of Livernois. But yes, and my great grandfather was actually a professor at the university.
Oh,
So
wow.
two men in my family, but in particular my grandpa, I always looked up to as like the wise one, right?
Right.
And he was. And I just thought, well, if I could get a sliver of what he's got, with how compassionate he was, and my grandparents were very involved in church and different groups, St. Vincent de Paul being one of their focuses, and just as time went on, you learned more about them where they were just quietly supportive. And what I mean by that is I found out really late in my grandmother's life, like the last year, maybe 2 years, that she had been sending um, you know donations to Indian Reserve for education for years. That was something that they gave, and I never knew that. I knew that locally they were very giving, right? Thanksgiving
Mm.
growing up often had an extra person or two that didn't have a place to go, and it just kind of became normal. Anyway, I look back at that and I think that was a huge driver. I mean, my parents were obviously very involved, and I grew up Catholic, so I was fortunate to see those activities, but they always reinforced like what the important pieces were, and I'm grateful for that. Um, yeah, so I did that. I went to Detroit Mercy. I left. I Everything kind of with Father Tim, right, doing campus kitchen, that fell into place, and then was looking for a job. It was 2012, so the market was pretty rough. And
Mm.
we had an executive in residence at the school, Kathy Schmidt, that was willing to listen to my appeal for, hey, I need a job and I would rather not go back to Cleveland. Not because I don't love it, but because I just felt something was special here that I wanted to be involved in. And that's how I ended up getting an interview and job at the food bank. And I I felt over time people have invested a lot in me, and so I wanted to be able to give that back. And so I did Contemplative Leaders in Action
Oh,
with Father Gary and Carrie Chaika. So I was part of that first class, and that really um, the intention there was to better tie work and faith. And that was something that really did help in that period of time, as well as throughout the rest of my career. Because now I have the tools necessary, and I know, okay, well, maybe I need to discern on this a little bit. And I'd love to say that I pray well every single day. Sometimes it's not as well as I'd like it to be, right? But at least with my boys, I pray every night. And at the end of the day, it all comes back to what am I being called to do? And can I help there?
right.
I am not naive to think if I'm sitting in a room, there are people that are smarter than me around. So what is my spot, right? Definitely not driven by me. It's definitely driven by the guy above. But I've been very fortunate to find some success in that, and that's why, like, I keep going every Sunday, no matter if I'm out of town, visiting family, or the snow is crazy, so we go to the church that's right down the street. It's important for me to be there to say thank you, because yeah, my family's been very blessed, even with the chaos of the world, to be where we are and to be able to have an impact. Always been pretty big. And in my personal history, I also love the Beatitudes, and I think that that's the most beautiful message. And if I can try to be somebody that lives that out,
Yeah.
all the better. Yeah.
So yeah, it definitely influences and informs your work there.
Yeah.
Um, that's awesome. So just thinking a little bit about uh, your work, is there anything about your work or about the organization that you really wish people knew that I didn't think about asking? Or
No, you've asked questions quite well. I think that it's easy to forget the challenges that people have against them. It's easy to
yeah,
say, well, I figured it out. But a lot of people don't have those simple tools, right? And so a lot of our work is just educating people on, what are your rights, but also how can we make you whole for a longer period of time, or how can you help yourself in a better way? And so a lot of UCHC's work, especially with our case managers, are, hey, yes, you had a really tragic history, but how do we turn this around? How do we help you in this moment of time? And I'm really proud of what they've been able to do on an individual level, and to hear people's testimonies about what the team has done for individuals in their lives. It's pretty amazing. And I just think, if you're interested in housing and figuring it out, come to the table. I think, it's a big problem to solve. It needs everybody. We're part of the city of Detroit's work. We're part of our own mission in the courthouse, and we want to make as many people homeowners as possible. But housing's expensive, even in Detroit, where it's not as expensive, right? You can buy a house at auction for a couple $1,000s, but that doesn't mean it's an actual livable situation either.
Right.
So we do all the things that can kind of help people solidify their life and find success, but we need other people at the table too, because I think there's a lot of creativity, but there's always opportunity. Someone has some piece of knowledge that isn't at that table that could be really useful. And we all need to come together as a system, from landlords to, the county and collecting taxes to, you name it, everybody in between, as a resident, as a homeowner, as an investor, whatever that looks like. I think there's a lot more there. And yeah, I think just, we as a parish too, we can be more involved to an extent, at least supporting the residents around and offering opportunities for beautiful music and all of that, right there, that brings value to the community. And I think, oftentimes we belittle ourselves and what we can contribute, but the reality is that little thing might be the factor that keeps someone coming to mass, or makes people feel comfortable in the seat, or whatever it might be. I think, we can always do more and think beyond, right? So.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.